because there was no restaurant in those days. Okay, is Catalina dangerous? Hey, fly me to Catalina. So you have people that come and visit. What's the first thing they say if they know that you're a pilot? Hey, fly me to Catalina, because they've heard about Catalina, or maybe they haven't. And so you, as a pilot, say, hey, let's go to Catalina. It's a great destination, right? It's 20 minutes flight. It's beautiful, completely away from Orange County, and totally different from LA and Orange County. So the question is Catalina dangerous? Well, so since 1983, the NTSB tells us there's been 56 accidents. Did you see the yellow? Yeah. This was a particularly, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but anyway, 56 accidents since 1983. These are just like the last couple of years. With startling similarity, almost all of them could have been prevented with just a little bit of common sense and a little bit of pre-knowledge. So let's talk about that. Now, is that an unusually high number of accidents? Yeah. For a small airport with no tower, it's an unusually high number of accidents. So why is it dangerous? All right, let's talk about number one. It's an aircraft carrier style runway. It's got cliffs on this side, and it's got cliffs on this side. So that creates a bunch of problems for pilots. Number one, the cliffs look weird. You're not used to seeing cliffs at the end of the runway. You guys are used to seeing nice flat runways. There's no room for undershoots or overruns. If you undershoot, you're going to hit that. If you overrun, you're going to go off the cliff. So it's dangerous in that sense. It creates an illusion of being too short because it's on a mesa. So when you're landing, it freaks you out because it looks a lot shorter than it is. It's actually 3,000 feet. 20 left at John Wayne is 2,700 feet. So this is actually longer than that. But for some reason, people freak out and because it looks short because of that illusion. It's affected greatly by the wind because it sits up here at this mesa, right? So when the wind is blowing, we're going to look at what happens there, but it's greatly affected by the wind. It's not like a regular airport where, okay, so the wind's blowing 18 knots, no big deal. If you're pretty good, you can go in there, be careful. Not Catalina. We're going to talk about why. So the intimidation factor is high. A lot of pilots will go, oh, nah, I'm not going to Catalina. I've heard it's dangerous. So and then they see it. I had a passenger with me who had never been to Catalina, and we were flying towards the airport, and he says, we're going to land on that? He said, I don't know. I think I want to go home. I'm like, well, we can go home if you want, but it's really not a problem. So what's the solution to those? Well, let's look from a pilot's point of view. Practice with the CFI. Go there with the CFI. Don't go there for the first time, just, Old West cowboy time. Go with the CFI and practice. You can't do touch and goes, but you can do taxi backs. So go and do it a few times until you get the hang of what it looks like. Fly a normal pattern. People get out here and they start flying these funky, crazy patterns where they come in 800 feet too high with 10 knots too much speed, and they fly the illusion freaks them out, and they fly these completely non-standard patterns. It's just a runway. The fact that there's cliffs and all this other stuff, that's just really just sightseeing. But it's just a normal runway. So do everything that you do normally. Put your flaps down opposite the numbers or however you were taught, and fly a normal downwind and a normal base, and wait till the numbers are at your 45 and make your turn and all that kind of stuff. Just fly a normal pattern. Concentrate on the numbers. Concentrate on the runway, not on all this other stuff. It makes a big difference, and it takes a little bit of practice to do that. 2, the downdrafts. This is what got us, that yellow Cessna that Jordy brought up. This is what hit that flight. First of all, look at the way the runway is. On runway 22, which is the normal runway where everybody lands, it's uphill. There's like a 2 to 3% grade. There's a crest, right here at the crest there's a hump, and then it goes down again on runway 4 side. So what happens is, because this is a big flat mesa here and it's got these cliffs, when the wind is blowing just 10 knots, which to us is nothing, when the wind starts blowing 10 knots, you get a downdraft right here on the approach end. Okay? And if the wind's blowing, if you have a Santa Ana condition, offshore flow, then the wind is blowing up there, which is this, by the way, is where the Cessna hit, right there. Now, you guys remember from your physics, force equals mass times acceleration, right? Imagine the force. Remember the air, even though we say, oh, air, big deal, it's wind, 10 knots is nothing. Air is a fluid, and while it's not as heavy as water, or it doesn't have the viscosity of water, it's still a fluid. Imagine the mass of air when you have wind, when you have high winds, that is moving along here. And imagine acceleration at 25 knots or something. Imagine the force of that creating downdrafts. The day that those guys crashed, the winds at Catalina were blowing about 25 knots. And on shore here, there was wind shear advisories at John Wayne, and it was gusting to 29, 30 knots. These guys had never been to Catalina. I was reading the NTSB report. They'd never been to Catalina, and it was two guys, and I'm not clear whether one's an instructor or just, I think they were just renters because it was a flying club airplane. They decided to go to Catalina because, big deal, 25 knots wind, that's nothing. We've done that they came out of Long Beach. That's not a big deal, right? Well, at Catalina, it's a big deal. You've got an enormous mass of air flying over this runway and dropping down right here. And that's like going into a waterfall. And like Logan said in the last seminar, in our little airplanes, you can't outpower a downdraft. Not like that. And so these guys were coming in, and they came in too low because they got hit by the upward runway illusion, which we'll look at in a minute. So they were actually too low, even though they thought they were normal. They got hit in the downdraft, they powered up, and it was too late. It was a Cessna, and it smashed into the side. Luckily, from what I've heard, they went to the hospital, they didn't die. One of them was pretty banged up, but it was unfortunate. These guys had never been there before. Those downdrafts are no big deal if the wind is not very high. But when you start seeing 15 knots at Catalina, that's the time to either stay home, go with a CFI, or if you're good and you've done it a lot, be careful. Come in with a little bit of power. Come in a little bit high, like 15 feet, 20 feet high, not 300 feet high. So anyway, that downdrafts cause sink, either here or here, depending on which way the wind's blowing. Every time. Every time. It's just not, the sink is not intense until it starts getting right around 15 knots. That's when it gets treacherous. So you have to be careful. It's just like a mountain downdraft. That's all it is. So would you go flying in 20-knot winds in the mountains in a Cessna or a Sling? I wouldn't. And if I did, I wouldn't get anywhere close. And here you are coming in with no power, you know, at 70 knots right here where the downdraft is, or here if it's an offshore floating. So it's just like a mountain downdraft, and you won't be able to outpower it. So what do we do? What's the solution? Well, the solution is you come in so that you're about 15 or 20 feet above the numbers. Don't come in too high. Anticipate your sink. Keep your hand on the throttle. You could fly to final with a little bit of power and cut it over the numbers. That's fine. But stay on airspeed. Don't come in 15 knots too fast. And then on windy days, if it's over 15 or 20 knots, just stay home. It's not worth it. It's not worth trying to prove that you're some kind of super pilot by going to Catalina on 20-knot days. It's just not worth it. You can get a $100 burger somewhere else. It may not be bison, but hey. The runway is bowed, as we saw in the other picture. So when you're taking off on runway 22, which is the normal runway, you can't see traffic taking off on runway 4. You won't see them at all. So there's the hump there. So if they're taking off and they're not making the right radio calls, you'll hit them. And there have been like 8 mid-airs like this. So you have to be really careful. Because the runway is humped, you can't see it. So you don't see the opposing traffic. It makes the runway look shorter, which we'll look at in a minute. It makes the takeoff run longer because you're taking off uphill. So on a warm day, you've got high density altitude and an uphill runway, right? So you've got two things running against you. What do we do to fix that? Well, pay attention to the radio calls when you're still 8 to 10 miles out. Don't be those pilots that right before they get to the island, they tune in the frequency and they say, any traffic in the area, please advise. That always makes me crazy. Start listening 8 to 10 miles out so you can get a mental picture of what the traffic is doing. Never start your takeoff roll until you're sure there's no opposing traffic. So look at it when you're taxiing out to the runway before you get to the hump. You can look back and see if anybody else is taxiing to the runway. When taxiing for takeoff at Catalina, make your initial radio call from the ramp, clearly stating which runway you're going to use. Make it clear. 6 Tango Whiskey's on the ramp, taxiing to runway 22 for departure, departing to the north. Study the airport diagram before you go, and use the runway turnoffs as your landmarks to determine how much runway you have left. Don't fixate on the cliffs. A lot of people start to freak out about the cliffs, and they think, okay, it's getting shorter. It's too short. I'm not going to make it. And they start freaking out. Use the runway exits from the airport diagram as your checkpoints. So you know that if you're not airborne, by the time you get to the, let's say, just past the windsock, which is halfway down, then abort it and wait for a few hours and try again later. Calculate your takeoff distance, taking into consideration the 3% uphill grade. That's that FAA, you know, the famous FAA thing that if you have a 3% grade, how much does it increase your takeoff distance? This is the way it looks like on final. The crest right there looks like that's the end of the runway. So pilots come in thinking this is the length of the runway. Also, the runway is uphill, so it's creating an illusion already. So a lot of pilots have come down here and smashed on their brakes thinking, oh crap, I'm going off the cliff. And they either collapse their nose wheel or get a flat tire or swerve off the runway. and you can't see the traffic that's sitting there waiting to take off from runway 4. So the crest is just over halfway. Don't slam on your brakes thinking you're going off the cliff. It's 3,000 feet. You got plenty of space. My rule is this. See the windsock? If I'm not down by the windsock, I go around. That's about halfway. Here's the runway turnoff. So these are the ones that you can use for your to gauge your approach and where you are along the runway. Those two exits right there. And if you look at the diagram, this is about halfway right there. That's halfway. And you can kind of see the hump here. You can't see the traffic over there on runway 4. Okay?
Just curious. Is that a recent photo of this repaved?
This photo was taken in 2003.
Okay.
It was right after they did a slurry coat, new slurry coat. So you'll think you're lower than you are because of the uphill runway. So this may look normal to you, but already you're too low. In other words, the uphill runway causes you to think you're okay, but you're too low because the runway is sloped upwards. So you're used to looking down on the runway. If the runway is sloped upwards, it's the same as you being up here. See, you're looking down the runway, but it's not. The runway's like this, so you compensate by going lower to make it look right. So already you're too low. If you were to flatten the runway, you'd go, oh crap, I'm too low. So that's an illusion you have to be careful of. So use your altimeter. Use your altimeter. Look where you are altitude-wise. Don't just judge it, at least at first. Don't judge it only on what you see of the runway because it's uphill, and so it gives you that illusion. Okay? So bottom line, always think I'm lower than I think I am. There is. There's a VASI which
it's hard to see,
goes on and which sometimes works, sometimes not. But yes, there is, and you can use that. That's a great thing to use as a guide, is the VASI. An approach that looks normal at Catalina is already too low. Solution, we're almost done here. The entire key to landing on Catalina safely is to make an approach that's not too low and not overcompensated by being too high. It takes some practice to adjust your visual cues so that a normal approach can be made. One trick is not to do a long final. A long final at Catalina messes with your head because of the cliff and the uphill runway. So then it just gives you more time to do weird things. So just do a normal downwind, base, and final. Don't do a long final, which is a whole another thing. There's just the FAA's version of why this happens, the runway slope illusion. See, he thinks he's normal, he's actually too low. An upsloping runway creates an illusion that, you know, if you're here, a normal approach is here. If you tilt that runway up, it automatically makes you look like you're too high, so you compensate. Now if you straighten the runway, you realize you're too low. So that's the whole downslope illusion. We talked about this. If the approach looks low, go around. Approach that looks too low on Catalina should be abandoned with a goer. Don't drag it in with power. I see pilots doing that all the time. They get too low and they start to drag it in with power. And that's bad if you start to get behind the power curve. And now if there's a downdraft, you have no reserve. There's nothing there to go, especially in these little guys. I mean, 850 pounds, there's no match for a good wind. So if you're too low, just go around. Remember from your student pilot days, go around as your friend. Density altitude, you guys already know about density altitude. This is just a graphic view of it. But the thing is, at Catalina, during August, the density altitude is typically 5,000 to 6,000 feet. And pilots don't pay attention to that. There was a crash 3 years ago. Cirrus, 4 people. They landed in the morning. They had luggage. They were going to stay for a couple days. They landed. They had baggage, and they had almost full tanks in the Cirrus SR-22. They stayed for 2 days. They went out to the airport at 3 in the afternoon on August 16th. It was 105 in Orange County that day. They got into the plane, and apparently the witnesses say they didn't see them checking anything or calling weather or doing any kind of calculations. They loaded their baggage into the airplane because they had been fine when they took off from wherever they came from. I think it was Camarillo. So it was fine there. They got into the airplane. They started the takeoff roll. He got the ground effect and managed to lift the nose up right before the end of the runway. It kind of wallowed and it went into the ground right after the end of the cliff, and they all died. Actually, 3 of them died, 1 of them lived. And what was the difference? You know, they interviewed the pilot several months after he got out of the hospital. And he said, I just thought that because I had been okay filling that airplane up with that much fuel and that much passengers every time that I had ever flown. He said, I thought the airplane had enough power to do Catalina. Well, unfortunately, he didn't do the calculations. That's happened countless times. So density altitude at Catalina is a killer. Don't mess around with it. I've had people where I probably shouldn't, and I probably shouldn't even admit this, but I've watched guys, and guys or girls, fill their airplane up with people and baggage on a hot day, and I've actually walked over and said, hey, just out of curiosity, I'm an instructor, I don't want to get in your face, but do you know how long it's going to take you to take off? Like, have you done the calculation? Every one of them said, well, no, because it takes off in like 1,500 feet, so I'm sure it's going to be fine. And I said, well, just out of curiosity, do you have the book? And they'll pull out the POH, and I go, look, it's going to take 2,600 feet, and this runway's 3,000 feet long. I said, this was when the airplane was new, with a brand new engine and a test pilot. I said, do these guys know how close you're cutting it, the non-pilots? And almost invariably, they said, well, I guess I shouldn't take off. They could die. So density altitude at Catalina is a big deal. People kind of brush it off. They'll give it to you on the A1. It'll say, density altitude, 4,600. We'll listen to that and go, okay, wait a minute, 4,600 feet in a sling. Okay, if I'm heavily loaded, how much runway do I need? Am I going to be okay? And of course, our sling manuals are not super detailed, so it's not like it gives you takeoff distance to that level. But if you're in anything else, you actually get some pretty accurate takeoff distances, which is important to look at. I know it seems stupid, like, really, I'm going to calculate density altitude? I'm a private pilot. The FAA says I know everything. Call the AWAS, and it'll give you a density altitude at the end of the recording. Calculate your takeoff roll. And don't overload your airplane anytime, especially on Catalina. Don't do that thing where you go, well, I can put another 200 pounds into it. That's fine, but not at Catalina on a hot day, especially in an underpowered Sling or Cessna or whatever. Approach terrain creates illusions. This is a little video of my airplane. Can't play the medium. Gosh darn. All right, well, I'll show it to you next time. Anyway, this is my biplane coming in on approach to Catalina, and it shows the varying terrain. That changing terrain intimidates a lot of pilots, because think about how you're doing the approach at Catalina. You come over some kind of rolling hills, then you turn downwind, and suddenly you're at 2,600 feet above the ocean, and then you turn base, and then you turn final, and now you're going towards some really high mountains. There's a huge mountain over here on the left, and the runway, which sits on top of a mesa, is in front of you. It's really easy to get all confused about, okay, what altitude am I? I'm 2,600 feet above the ocean, but how high am I above the runway? You start to second guess. So use your altimeter. That approach creates some funky illusions. A lot of pilots alter their normal approach, which we talked about. They do these funky, I watch them out there and they're like, 1,500 feet over the numbers, and they try to slip and they're coming down too fast. And it's crazy. It's funny to watch. Funny, odd. The pattern goes from 1,000 feet AGL to 2,600 feet AGL in just a few seconds. So that approach over all this changing terrain creates some funky illusions. What do we do about that? Well, you have to use your altimeter. Keep your pattern altitude and fly normal approach. Putting in flaps where you normally do, keeping the same speeds you do everywhere else, just fly a normal approach. Okay? Don't alter it because it's Catalina. There's no fuel or mechanics here. So if you have an engine problem, you have two choices. You either fly in a mechanic and the tools to the airport and figure out where to do the work, or you take the wings off, truck the airplane down to Avalon, and then ferry it across to San Pedro. That's about $16,000. So don't go there with bald tires. Luckily, flats are smaller, but I've seen people who do the brake thing, where they come down and they think the end of the cliff is there, so they slam on the brakes, and either like on a low prop clearance airplane like a Piper Meridian or Mirage, they'll actually hit the prop because they slam on the brake so hard and the tip will hit the asphalt, or they'll smash it really hard and the nose wheel will either collapse or bend backwards. Now they've got an expensive problem. Because how do you fix that? You can't fly it off, so you got to fly in a mechanic to do all that work, like I said, truck it back. Flat tires are common due to the crappy surface here on Catalina. The runway's terrible. Let's face it, it's terrible. The latest, I talked to Jason, who's the manager there yesterday, because I wanted to get some updated information. So the latest is that they have gotten enough money, and they've got a donation from somebody to where they're going to actually re-asphalt the runway. See, before, in 2003, it was just a slurry coat. They kind of do just the top part. Now they're going to actually repave and actually fill in the holes and everything else. You can imagine what an enormous thing that is, because they have to bring bulldozers and cement and asphalt, all that stuff from the mainland. but apparently they have enough money to where they want to do this by summer of next year, 2017. So hallelujah, because it's really, really bad. Yes, sir.
The bowing, was that intentional, and why don't they just fix that?
So the Boeing, the bow in the runway, when they surveyed it, it was okay, but apparently within a few months after they put it in, the land on the runway 22 side started to sink. They didn't quite compact it enough, is what they think, and so it started to sink. So it went down lower than the part, than the part on because remember it was two mountains, and they filled in, they blew them off, filled in the hole. They didn't fill in this side apparently. They didn't pack it hard enough, is what they think happened. So the Boeing is actually kind of getting worse as time goes on. Oh, so what do we do about the mechanics? Fill up on fuel before you're departing your destination. A lot of people will go to Catalina thinking there's fuel there, and there's not. And bring basic tools, extra oil, extra hoses, hose clamps, heavy-duty tape, like that silicone tape is great. And don't come with bald tires. A lot of people get flats because the crummy runway surface. This is my biggest pet peeve. If you're going to go to Catalina, enter the pattern correctly. Don't be those guys who come in on a long straight in from San Diego or whatever, and they expect everybody to get out of their way. The pattern at Catalina is very, very esoteric. You have to keep the pattern as it is. In other words, fly a real 45-degree entry and a downwind in the whole thing. Come in over two harbors. That's the little skinny part that's on I guess it would be the west side of the island, the northwest corner of the island. Come in from either San Pedro or Orange County, come into Twin Harbors, then make your left turn, enter on the 45, and go into the runway. Don't do straight ins. That's not just me. That was directly from the mouth of the airport manager. He says, please tell everybody not to do straight ins, because that's what causes mid-air collisions, because we don't expect you to be there. And I've actually heard people lie. I heard a guy coming in on final, and he was like 8 miles out. And he says, 25 Tango is on long 45 for runway 22. And he was out, he actually called his base. He goes, 22 Charlie or whatever he was, turning base, and here he was right there. You could see his landing. People are amazing. But he was too lazy. He didn't want to do a pattern because, I don't know, it's either too hard, takes too much time. So come in from two harbors. That's kind of the tip there. No straight ins. That's pretty obvious. Use one of two patterns. I'll show you the two patterns and the solution. We talked about that on weekends. And always enter from two harbors. On slow weekdays, enter upwind. So let me show you what that looks like. Here are the patterns that you can fly at Catalina. Enter from two harbors on the 45. Go downwind, base, and final for runway 22. Or on slow days, come in over here. Enter upwind. The mountain is right here, Mount Orizaba. Come in over the mountain, make your turn on crosswind, and then join downwind here, and then make your entry. They're okay with that. You can do that. Just, this is a standard upwind pattern. The thing with straight-ins, the FAA, since October of 2014, is prosecuting pilots who get in accidents, not related to the pattern, but who get in accidents that did a straight-in. So if you do a straight-in and have some kind of runway incursion or some other violation, the FAA has, in many instances, gone after the pilot because they did a straight-in approach. Remember that in the AIM, a straight-in approach is neither a standard nor a recommended approach. So don't do straight-ins. Well, you can't be in that much of a hurry. If you have to go to the bathroom, just pee or something. Or go before you fly. Communicate accurately. Almost done here. We got one more. Accidents have occurred because the pilots reported wrong information about the position. I hear that all the time. 385 Tango is about 8 miles north of Avalon, and they're actually 2 miles west. But they're like, I don't know, north, south, west. There's only 4. There's only 4. I got a 25% chance. The go around is your friend. Go around. But report accurately. Think about it before you go. Like when I go with my students, I sit down and I say, okay, look, here's the chart. We're coming from here. So what is this? Okay, because we're coming from the southeast. Okay, so when you call, say you were southeast. Now, how far? And I love when people just guess. I don't know, I'm about 10 miles. Look, take your plotter out and mark where 10 miles is. Or use your GPS. You guys all fly with GPS. When it says 10 miles to go to Catalina, call and say, I'm 10 miles southwest at 2,500. I'm going to be entering from two harbors onto the 45 for runway 22. Now everybody knows where to look. And yeah, it takes a couple extra seconds, but it's not like it's John Wayne Airport. It's pretty slow there. So report accurately. Listen starting 10 miles out, know your distances and directions, look at them on the chart first. Report your position with accuracy and listen for opposing traffic.